Today, I'm going to be reacting to and judging the face cams of famous streamers. We're going to be taking a look at Courage, Fuslie, Mizkif, SweeetTails, TimTheTatman, and Pokimane. Things that I'm going to be looking for is, they have good lighting, does their setup highlight them as the main subject of their stream, and does their background either complement or add something to the face cam. First up, we have the man himself, Courage. Now, just looking at the shot, one thing I can say right away is he has plenty of light, which makes it so I can clearly see his face, but he kind of went overboard with the lighting. And a lot of times what you'll hear when you're first starting out as a streamer is to have a lot of light so your camera can clearly see your face. But oftentimes people will take that as turn every single light on in your room just to make it as bright as possible. But in reality, that can actually make your image look worse. And so in this example, he has a nice blurry background. His camera is pointed into the corner of this room, making it look like there's a lot of depth. But for some reason, he's still just not separating from the background, and he's just kind of blending in. And that's because he has way too much light going on behind him. And so you can see he has this cool neon sign of his logo and this cool accented wall with some extra LEDs as well. But I think if he would go ahead and turn off his overhead lights in his room, that would really make these other lights in the background just really pop. And if he leaves his main key lights on his face, that will really make it so he's separating from the background, plus the blurry background. It would look really nice in here. I think literally all he needs to do is just turn off the overhead lights, and this would look a billion times better. And now this is just a super small nitpick, but I kind of think this colored rainbow wheel right next to his face is a little distracting. It's not the end of the world, but I would probably just put that out of frame unless you're actively using it for that stream. But other than that though, yeah, this would be a great shot. Just turn the overhead lights off and this would be 10 out of 10. Now, next up, we have the amazing Fuslie, who almost won Content Creator of the Year this year, but she is running into a very similar problem with Courage. And it's not that necessarily she has too much light going on, but she's having the problem of lighting is actually working against her and is making it so this shot just looks really, really flat. And the reason is because everything is kind of just this one faded pink color. And now I've seen her stream a handful of times of where I noticed she has these colored lights in the background, and she has one kind of behind her chat box you can see, but she changes these lights depending oftentimes on what shirt she's wearing. Like if she's wearing a blue shirt, she'll make these colored lights blue. And in theory, that kind of sounds cool. She's changing the theme, keeping it fresh. But the problem with that is everything is just kind of blending in. So for example, she's wearing a pink shirt in this shot. Instead of doing pink background lights, I would maybe do blue lights, and then she would really pop out and separate from the background here, and it would look so good. Other than that, she has plenty of light on her face, looks great there, and even though she's not shooting into the corner of a room, her room's big enough to where it looks like it's blurring enough of where she can get that separation as long as she changes her colors up. And then again, I think the shot would look really good with that change. Next up, we have Mizkif. Now this is a really interesting one because we could go off of our previous two examples and say that his background is too washed out with overhead lights, turn off your overhead lights. But in his scenario, he's a just chatting streamer for the most part. And oftentimes we'll have a lot of different people coming in and out of his room, and they might not be right up in the front next to the key lights lighting them up. So his room does need to stay pretty well lit throughout it. So to at least spice up his room a little bit, I would probably add some random pops of RGB lights throughout these shelves or cabinets or whatever those are, and that would at least spice it up a little bit, maybe dim the overhead lights. Other than that, the lighting on his face is pretty good, but lighting honestly isn't the main problem that he has in his setup. The main problem that he has is that everyone else around him is always out of focus. You can see here, Emaru is completely out of focus, even though she's really not that far behind him. And there's a few things that you could do to fix this, where you have multiple people in the shot wanting to be in focus, is close down the aperture on your camera to like F9, F11, something like that. And that will make it so your background blur isn't quite as intense, making it so other people in the shot aren't quite as blurred out. The other thing that he could do to help with it is to actually zoom out the camera a little bit, and that will help with some of the compression of the background blur happening, and you won't really notice it quite as much. The last thing that I would fix about this shot is the fact that his camera is set too low. Oftentimes the recommendation is to have your camera set at eye height or a little above and angle it down on you. It's usually the most flattering. And if you have a camera angle where it's below your eye line looking up at you, it's not the most flattering, and his camera angle definitely isn't doing him any favors here. Moving on, we have another really funny streamer. Her name is SweeetTails. Now, I actually really enjoy this shot. This shot has so many good things going for it. Now, she actually has contrasting colors versus her skin tones, so she as a streamer is really popping out from the background. She has some depth into her room, and it has a nice background blur, so she's really separated from the background, making her the main focus of the stream, which is 9 times out of 10 what streamers want. I really like the background. It's interesting enough without being distracting. She has that cool pattern wall with some LEDs. She even has that little pineapple up in the corner just for a little pop of fun. Now, the only thing that I have seen wrong with this setup, and if you watch her streams, you probably have seen this too, of where she has a picture of Prison Mike behind her, and it's a face that a camera doesn't really know the difference between her face and that face, and oftentimes she'll go out of focus and the camera is auto-focusing on that picture in the background, and she's sitting there frustrated, not knowing what's going on. And so what I would do to fix this is you could do it in a couple of different ways. One, you could set the autofocus area to just kind of be the bottom part of this face cam, so it doesn't even look up at that face at all. Or you could play around with maybe turning off face detection altogether for autofocus, and that way cameras usually will end up focusing more so on whatever usually the closest or what it thinks is the biggest thing. So that would probably help, one of those two things. Other than that, this setup is really, really good in my opinion. You all know him and love him. It's TimTheTatman, super entertaining streamer, but my God, what is going on with the shot? It is not good. The first thing that I'm sure you notice is that he is right up against a plain wall. It's extremely boring and not the most pleasant thing to look at. But in fairness, one of the things that I think makes a good face cam is the fact that you stand out as the subject in your shot, and in a way, the plain wall actually kind of works, of where he's clearly the main subject here, but it's probably the most boring way of accomplishing that. In reality, what he should do is completely turn his desk around, have his camera pointed into the corner of a room so he gets a nice blurry background, and have some contrasting colors so he pops out. And I know that not everyone can do that, and sometimes you just have a weird room setup for whatever reason, but I know so many people have this issue of where they're right up against a wall, but then will complain that they don't have a blurry background. And that's because there's just no separation for there to be any sort of thing out of focus. One thing that I will compliment him on is the fact that he does have some practical lighting in the shot, which is that purple LED strip. It really does make a nice little pop to the setup, but yeah, he needs a lot of work. And finally, we have the queen of Twitch herself, Pokimane. And honestly, this is probably the best shot that we've seen so far. It's really well done. The first thing that I would say is she actually has an okay amount of separation between her and that back wall with all of her cool collectibles, which shows off her personality. But because there is enough distance, the camera's blurring those things in the background just enough to make them not distracting. And she's clearly the main focus. She's well lit. But what makes it work really well is the fact that she has these different pops of purple and turquoise / teal going on, and it just works really well. Obviously, she needs to clean up those lights down in the corner. Not a big deal, but overall, like, seriously, like a great shot. Great job, Pokey. The only thing that I might change in her setup is maybe lower the camera just ever so slightly, because if your camera's up a little too high, then you don't always really see into the eyes of the streamer and you don't really have quite as good of a connection. But honestly, great job, Pokey. I'm not gonna lie, I had a blast doing this. This was really fun. If there are other streamers that you would like for me to react to, leave their names down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos like this one, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.